So, good evening, everybody. I want to start off with a 20-second commercial. This afternoon, about 3 hours ago, and literally, Dakati Shim at the last minute, I received the book, The Three Images that I've published. Tomorrow night, Bezrat Hashem, here in the neighborhood, there is a book launch for those who can be there. If you can't, I'll just never speak to you again. Maybe joking. But if you don't have the information, you need the information, please let me know, and I'll be happy to pass it along. There's an interesting story behind the book. The book itself is full of stories, true stories, and hopefully share one of them with you tomorrow night in the background to the book. That'll be at 7:30. Okay, end of commercial. So where are we? We're going to start off right away with a slide. Tonight we're going to be going, there's the rest of this chapter, which from chapter 7, Perek Zion, to me seems to be divided into two distinct parts. I want to get the first part done, and when we arrive at the beginning of the second part, we'll stop. It won't be 15 minutes, but it won't necessarily take us the entire time to get to part 2. Again, that's not necessarily an official break within the chapter, but it's a logical break for me. But before we continue, let's just kind of review where we're at in Perek Zion, and we can look at the text itself. So this chapter deals again with Klipat Noga. The Klipa itself that we talked, the idea being, I know this is repetitious, but it's important, that which is parv, meaning it's not something that's treif, it's not something that's evil, it's not something that's bad, it's just not something that represents Kedusha. It's not something that in and of itself, in its current state, has any form of Kedusha. It has potential. It has the light that can shine through by certain activities. And the Balatanya divided the world, actually all of existence basically, into 3 categories. And we arbitrarily chose, let me fix that word here. Hold on, because there's no S in there. Arbitrarily chose percentages, but it's instructive, I think. We said like this: the 5% of the things in the world are Kedusha. Sifrei Torah, Tefillin, Mezuzot, Shabbat candles, Challah, things that you look at and you see Kedusha. Mezuzot, Sfarim, Sifrei Kodesh. The other 5%, the next 5% is Gimel Klipot HaTmeot, or the items that are have almost no ability to be rehabilitated, so to speak, and be brought to a level of Kedusha. Take Basar B'Chalav, for example, illicit relationships, whatever, there's a list. And that leaves 90% of the world pretty much Klipat Noga. What does that mean? That means the vast, vast majority of things that we come in contact with, whether it's physical things such as food, clothing, housing, cars, anything like that, or Machshava Dibur Ma'aseh, which is important to understand. Remember, that's the thought, speech, and action. When they are not being used, forget about when they're being used for an Avera. That becomes Gimel Klipot HaTmeot. But when they're not being used for Avodat Hashem, then they're still Klipat Noga. They're this shell that protects them, that covers them and prevents Kedusha from coming through, from shining through. So what changes that? That's the question. What has an impact on meaning the Klipat Noga? You and me. We have the ability, and maybe probably even more important to say the requirement, to elevate things in this world to go beyond Klipat Noga, to make them fall in the first category of Kedusha. His extensive description or example was food. When we eat, and we're going to talk a little bit about food again tonight. When we eat food, he pointed out that it comes from our nefesh abahamit, because it's a ta'ava we have, a desire we have to eat. Doesn't mean, assuming of course the food is kosher, there's nothing wrong with eating. It's a very good thing to do. We have to do it. We have a natural inclination or drive to eat. We have hunger, thank God. So in and of itself, the food's nothing wrong with it, but it's still Klipat Noga. If I look at a hamburger, I look at a hot dog, I look at a salad, I look at an apple, it's Klipat Noga. I don't see Kedusha. But he said that when we do take that food, and we eat it not just with one bite, but when we have in mind while we're eating and during the course of the meal that you're doing this for Shem Shamayim. You're doing it for the sake of heaven because you want to be healthy. You want to serve Hashem. That constant thought while you are eating not only raises the level of that food from Klipat Noga to Kedusha, but he says, he uses the words, as we said last week, I'm looking inside, Ve'olah LaHashem ke'olah u'chekorban. That food Ke'ilu goes up to Hashem like a korban olah, or a burnt offering, like a korban to God, and like a sacrifice. And that's how we, by extension, said that, don't forget, we refer to our table where we eat as a shulchan. The shulchan is like a mizbeach. Why is it like a mizbeach? So, okay, so the general understanding is that food is special and we have to thank Hashem, and okay, that's nice. But on a much deeper level, when we raise the level of our food as we eat, and especially on Shabbat, we raise it up by having intention to eat it because we want to serve Hashem better. And not just when you make a bracha and then you take the first bite and then the rest is all on autopilot, but when you really have it in mind, which is not easy, that changes it to a level of Kedusha, and then also becomes a form of a korban to Hashem on your table, which is Ke'ilu Mizbeach. And that's pretty much where we left off last week. What we're going to do tonight, we're going to read a few more lines, quite a few lines, and then we have a number of things to hear from Rav Steinsaltz Zatzal about some of the concepts that are going to be brought up in here. So let's take it to the beginning. Make this large. Okay, we're going to start. See that period here in your text? It says, it starts with the words "V'chein ha'omer milta debedichuta." Just before this was the end piece that I was talking about before, that if a person eats to keep the mitzvah of Oneg Shabbat and Yom Tov, and he's doing it constantly through the meal, then he has this influence on Klipat Noga, and it goes ke'olah u'chekorban. That's where we left off, and just in my explanation, and we left off last week. V'chein, and furthermore, and similarly, it's a word I cannot say. Similarly, there, got it out. Ha'omer milta debedichuta. What's a milta debedichuta? So in Hebrew, we say it's a bedicha, a joke. Someone can say a joke. L'fakech ta'ato, u'lesameach libo l'Hashem, u'letorato va'avodato. In order to open one's mind, to sharpen one's mind, to make one happy, to have an inclination towards Hashem's Torah and service of Hashem, shetzrichim liot besimcha. That remember that the idea of learning and being a Jew, there's going to be an entire section, not a chapter, an entire section of multiple chapters of what is simcha. We're going to come to that. It's a critical, fundamental idea within Sefer Tanya. We're going to come to that down the road. I think that's like 8 chapters, maybe less, but it was a lot of chapters. What a person does that tells a joke. You're sitting there, you start off a class, you start off a conversation, whatever it might be, to lighten the mood a little bit. But your intention is not to derisive, it's not to be racist, it's not to just stand to crack a joke, but you're doing it because you want to engage your students, like Rava did to his students, that he would tell jokes to his students before. This is Rava. This is a person who spanned two kufot of the Tanaim, the Mishnah time, and the Gemara time, the Amoraim. And here's this giant. Imagine you walking into the shir in his city, where it was Pumbedita or Surah, Neharda. I don't keep that in my head. One of those cities. And starts up a shir with a joke. But the purpose was to get everyone involved, to engage, because one of the worst things you can do when you try to teach is to be boring. I had to speak one time. I don't remember where it was. It was in Chicago, but I don't remember what the occasion was. And I'd be standing in the hallway. I was like the guest speaker of this event. And there were people there who didn't know me. And most of the people already knew me, most of them from Chicago. And I had me standing in the hall. And right next to me, 2 ladies talking, said, "Man, I hope this guy isn't boring tonight." I said, "Yeah, I really hope not." So I kind of made eye contact with them at the beginning. They just kind of laughed. They said, "Yeah, okay, fine. You got to laugh at yourself also. It's fine. I hope I'm not boring." I actually have a rule with my students, the kids I teach, both in school and out of school, that if you ever find our discussions are boring or the learning is boring, got to let me know, because I don't do boring. And if I do, I want to back out of it. So the purpose of Miltad B'dichuta meant that you can even take something as silly as a joke and elevate that to avodat Hashem, to kedusha. That's your dibur, your speech, in a very base, parv kind of idea of telling a joke, and it still does something. It raises it. Now we're going to see the other side of this coin, of all this nice stuff. Mishu bezolale basar v'sovei yayin lemalot ta'avat gufo v'nafsho habhamit. A person who is a glutton, all they would think about is food, and they just want to stuff their face with meat and with wine, which is really just a derivative of their nefesh habahamit, their animalistic soul. Which we've already talked about at the beginning of the book. We talked about the idea that the desire for food, which is one of the four yesodot, which comes from mayim, from water. Again, I'm not going to get into that tonight. That's negative. Shemimenu midata ta'ava, which comes from the midah of ta'ava, of just plain lust or desire. Let me move this down where we're at. By doing that, by just stam eating and shoving food in your face and drinking wine and eating meat and just as a zolev v'soveh, you bring down the level of the life source. Remember, let's go back to the last chapter. In chapter 6, we saw that absolutely everything has a life source in this world. Everything, whether it comes directly from Hashem, it's kedusha, or from bifnim, so to speak, in quotes, from the internal God, or it comes me'achoraim, from the back. But everything has chiyut from Hashem. And what you're doing is, by taking that food, and you're just stam eating it with absolutely no chashiva, with no thought, no anything, you've now diminished the life source of that food, of meat and wine. And then all of a sudden, what you've in a sense done, at least on a temporary basis, and we'll see why it's temporary, you've then lowered that item to the gimel klipot hatmeot. And not only that, not only the food, but you yourself temporarily. The gufo na'aseh lahen levushu merkava, that your body becomes, it literally means, we used this term only a couple times before, a levush, we did many times, of a garment, and merkava, a chariot. Remember, the levush is something external that you wear. Chariot is something you sit in. So the food becomes that moment. Or sorry, your body becomes for that food, both a levush and a merkava, the fisha temporarily, adasha yashuva in gimel klipot hatmeot. What do you mean temporarily? What do you mean the fisha? I'm going to go back and read some depth on this in a few minutes. Ad asher yashuva adam, until the person does some form of tshuva. What does that mean? After I finish a meal, I got to go, "Oy, chatasi, avisi, pashati," that I just did a horrible thing and I have to do tshuva. We'll see. Doesn't mean that. V'yachzor la'avodat Hashem, and he'll then turn around and serve and return to avodat Hashem. Ki lefi shehaya habasar heter v'yayin kasher, just like the meat and the wine was kosher and it was permissible. It can be re-elevated when he goes to serve Hashem. Allow me to finish the sentence and I'll explain. This is the meaning of the word mutar. Mutar doesn't just mean permissible. It is no longer connected, it is no longer stuck, it is no longer attached to the negative. It's been released. It's mutar. Remember, we use the words mutar and asur for okay and not okay. It's asur to do that on Shabbat. It's mutar to do that. But what does it tafas mean? So we talked about this briefly once and now a little bit more in depth. That when you have that food in you, at that moment, that food and you became gimel klipot hatmeot temporarily until you've done something. We'll see what that something is in a moment. Just we'll say it means avodat Hashem. And then what you've done now is you've now uplifted it again and you've released it from the gimel klipot hatmeot and from klipa. That's the meaning behind mutar, which means release, like matir asurim, which we say in the morning. We thank God for releasing those who are captive. the divine energy, as it were, that's in the food becomes elevated when we use that food for service of Hashem. So let me explain in one sentence before we look at any of these slides, the process that's happening here. We talked last time about the potential for food to be elevated like a korban. Now he's talking about the flip side. You take food and almost in a gluttonous fashion, or not, just take it with no chashiva whatsoever about Hashem. Hopefully you make a bracha, which is, you have to do that. But just eat for eating's sake, not necessarily eating it because you want to be healthy for Hashem and to do avodat Hashem. You've lowered the level of that food from klipat noga to gimel klipot hatmeot. We said already, gimel klipot hatmeot can't be re-elevated, but again, we said a little bit of caveat that there are certain ways it can be. This is one. So what do you see here? What does it mean it can be re-elevated? First of all, it means it's released mutar. It's mutar, it's released from the gimel klipot hatmeot. And then it's elevated to a level of kedusha. But what does it mean through avodat Hashem? After I finish eating, and I say, you know what, I got to sit down and learn. Or you know what, I need energy. I have this energy now, I can exercise because I want to serve Hashem. When you then take it the other direction, that even though you ate it for not the right purpose or the right reason, it was kosher and everything else, blah, blah, blah. But now that you have the energy, and now that you have the calories from this, and you now use that energy and those calories from the food you ate to do service of Hashem, now you reawaken and re-elevate that food. Even though it came into you for the wrong reason or with the wrong intention, right? Reasons, right? You want to eat, or the wrong intention while you're eating it, or at least not the best intention, you still have the opportunity to change the direction that goes as far as kedusha. So let's take a look. Let me make this small again. And look at a couple of slides. Okay, oops. Hold on, I have to stop share for a minute. Sorry about that. Let's see here. No. What did I do? Okay. Let me just minimize you all for a minute. Go to the actual. Oh, okay, I got it back. I just had to click the screen. Sorry. Bring you back. Make big. And let's go to screen share. Roll the tape. Okay, here we go. Let's move up. This is the next slide. Okay, is it? So we started off by saying that when you do eat something without the intention because you want to serve Hashem by eating the food or by becoming healthy with eating the food in order to serve Hashem, then the level goes down to gimel klipot hatmeot. The life source, the sustenance, the fact that it exists, this food exists, is permissible. It's all from the chiyut comes from klipat noga. Therefore, when a person eats only for their own personal enjoyment, he himself becomes part of the world of klipa. Even more so. He even goes below the level of the food. The level of life source of that food is klipat noga. Whereas the person, when he eats only because of his hunger and for no other intention whatsoever, because as a man, he's a human, he still chose to be like any other animal species in the world. We all eat. What happens as a result? He still brings the level down even lower. To the level of gimel klipot hatmeot. This is what I started mentioning before, that the nefesh, the body of the person, by having this food in him or her that was not eaten with proper intention. And by the way, remember, I told you last time, this is not an easy thing to have this intention when you eat. But when you don't, you become a merkava, a chariot, a lavush. Your body becomes the garment, so to speak, of that food. Ha'adam shezolel basar v'soveh yain. A person who is like, I'm using the word glutton in a very broad term now. Gluttons for meat and wine. Just because he wants to eat to satisfy his desire, or anything else, not even food. That person becomes a chariot. Becomes the means towards kli bitui avur kochot hara. Now, what does that mean? Let's put it into physical terms. Let's say you come out of a store and I see you're carrying a couple of packages and I offer to help you. So I take my hands, I grab your bags, and I start carrying it to the car for you. So what have I done? I've helped you. I've done a chesed, I hope. I have a whole definition of chesed, but that's not for tonight. I've done a chesed. I've done a mitzvah, maybe, based on a Torah requirement. And I've become a merkava. My body became a chariot, so to speak, to do this mitzvah. Now let's take the other thing. I take that something in my hand. I take a knife, which is something that's benign, and God forbid I hurt someone with it. So my body used something benign, and the body itself is what helped carry that knife to do something terrible. So what happens is, in a sense, my body becomes the merkava, the chariot for the food, which was eaten, ingested, with absolutely no intention of connection to God. And from that perspective, when it comes to that, there's no difference between if I desire to eat something non-kosher or kosher. The line of kedusha and tuma, ritual impurity, don't like go directly to asur mutar. Hagdusha hi kol asher shayach, v'rak asher shayach el hakadosh baruch hu. Again, it's a very clear definition. What is kedusha? Anything that has a direct connection to God. It could be a glass of water. It could be an exercise. It could be eating. It could be a sefer Torah. Some are obviously more connected directly. Kol davar acher, anything else, kol ma sherotzeh u'mityaches el kol davar acher, and anything that is related to some other item besides God, shayach letchum haklipa, relates to klipa. Lachein, therefore, kasher adam shokea betoch ta'ava, when a person is immersed in his own desires, even if it is a desire of something that's permissible, you're allowed to eat almost every day of the year. Nevertheless, he's not connected to God at that moment. The moment a person decides, whether he's deciding it because an absolute conscious decision, or he just, without even realizing it, he's connecting himself to klipa. He's connected then, it becomes a merkava for gimel klipot hatmeot. Let's try to put this into some context. Because it sounds like when you listen to this, that unless you're some unbelievable tzaddik who's surrounded by just kedusha and holy thoughts, this is a zero for most people. We have multiple times a day an amazing opportunity to serve Hashem. You ask the average person, how do you serve Hashem? 99% of the time they'll say, through davening and learning Torah. And that's correct. Doing mitzvot. Absolutely. Maybe people say saying brachot. It's another way. Absolutely. We're going to talk about all these through the course of the book. Most people will not answer lying in the sun. Most people will not answer taking a swim, eating, drinking, because that's, unfortunately, most people don't have that intention that they're doing that to serve Hashem. But when you start to have, can you imagine for a moment, sit down, picture whatever your favorite meal is, whatever your favorite food is, you sit down and put down in front of you is that food, which is in a perfect condition, how you like it prepared. It's on bone china with a crystal glass goblet next to you, with everything you could possibly want in the physical way. All your senses are heightened right now just for that. And you stop and you make your brachot, as you should. Wonderful. And then before you take that first bite, and even while you're taking that and saying, oh my God, this is the best X, whatever X is, I've ever eaten in my life. And you take that same energy and say that when I'm eating this, it should be, you don't have to say L'Shem Yichud Kucha Bricho, but you're saying, I'm thank you, Hashem, for this food. I'm so happy I can put this into myself so I can be healthier for you. You have taken what is an absolute gastronomic, magnificent item in front of you, and you've elevated it well beyond the physical unbelievable part of it, but to a level of Kedusha. Now, if you take that same, in my case, let's say a steak, and I just shove it in my face, and I'm eating it just l'ta'ava, just because I have a desire to eat it, with after a bracha, and that's the last thing I think is Hashem, is that I finish the shachol niyabit varo and I move on, and that steak is going in my mouth, and as it's dripping on me, and it's like, whoa, this is unbelievable, this is great, and with no connection to Hashem whatsoever, neither the beginning, the middle, the end, that has lowered that food. It's lowered me as a person who serves Hashem. Because just like when I put on my tefillin, which is a mitzvah, I should have proper kavanah, and I don't have to raise those tefillin because they are already kedusha. How much more so when I'm trying to eat something which I don't have a mitzvah to eat, except only a couple of days a year. I had this opportunity, this unbelievable opportunity to take something physical and raise it to a level of service of Hashem. Okay, before we look at this slide, let's go back to the text. Oh, I see. I didn't have this on the screen before. Sorry. I was just reading it. No one stopped me. Okay. Okay, we got up to right here. Right here. Now, we said, let's make sure that I have, no, I did skip, there was a slide I wanted to do. Sorry. Hold on. Let's go back. There is a slide I wanted to do. Make this smaller yet again. I want the one that's in the middle of the Torah. If I have it on here. This is it. I didn't do this? Yeah. I didn't do the slide. Okay. We said that you have the opportunity through Avodat Hashem after the fact to re-elevate the food. And this is true, by the way, about other things. If we're focusing on food, you'll see why in a few minutes. I'm going to start here where he says here, Habasar v'hayayin sh'adam ochel, the meat and wine that a person eats, gam shelo v'chavana l'shem shamayim, even when they're not eaten l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven, na'asim chelek migufo. We know this already. We've talked about this. They become, we know this scientifically, when you eat, the food physically becomes a part of it. Chelek me'akoach hachiyuni, part of the essential power that you have. Without eating, we know that a person gets weak. The less they eat, the weaker they become. While you eat, when a person eats, they have more energy. That's the word, not power, energy. And then, after a person eats something that wasn't necessarily eaten l'shem shamayim for the sake of heaven, but then afterwards gets involved in something for Torah. He benches, says in Alam Michya, learns Torah, goes to Mincha, does an act of chesed because now he has the energy to do it. What's he doing? He is now using the energy he was given from that food to do the mitzvah. Therefore, when he himself is elevated to kedusha because he's doing a mitzvah, then by default, everything you ate before that gave you the energy to do what you're about to do is re-elevated as well. That's the kind of tshuva he's talking about, but we'll see it even goes deeper. Just like the person became a chariot and a garment for tum'ah, spiritual impurity, so too it can turn it all around fairly easily to become that levush and the chariot for kedusha. At the moment he ate just like any other animal, that food became a part of klipa. But then when a person did something to serve Hashem afterwards, became directly a part of service of Hashem because of the energy he got. This, to me, by the way, is a bit of a consolation to me personally, because whereas I'm not very rigid, I tend to eat lunch around the same time of day, and I try to go to the 1:30 mincha Pnei Shmuel. And when I'm eating, I'm not going to pretend I'm any kind of a tzaddik whatsoever. It's not like I'm sitting there going, I'm not going to eat this meal because I want to serve Hashem. I don't do that. I should, right? At least for a minute to think that way, especially if I'm learning and teaching Tanya, you'd think. But after I finish eating, I bench, and 95% of the time, I get up and I go straight to shul. The energy I have is from that food. The davening I have, the energy I have to daven is from direct result of the food. So that food that maybe have reached, the Gimel Klikot HaTmeot, has now been reawakened, and now that food becomes a level of Kedusha. Adam Lomed, Mitpalel, Osa Mitzvah. The person learns, davens, does a mitzvah, and he makes use of those things from the physical world to do it. He put them into his being. In other words, like just I said, I put the food into me, and then I use the energy from that. Whether I ate the food l'shem shamayim or I didn't, the end result is I do have energy, and that energy is given to me. And so I used it for the good thing, then I've elevated it. At that moment, there is what's called in law the proximate, not approximate, proximate, the word proximity, close, is the proximate cause of my koach, and I'm using that to elevate it to a level of kedusha. Therefore, they are part of the elevation to a level of kedusha. Okay, now let's go back to the text. Okay, let's make this big. Okay, and we're going to pick it up over here where it says, Rak. Now, I'm going to read something to you. I'm going to self-edit here before I continue. Let me just see something. Okay, I'm going to read something. I'm going to give it a bit of an explanation, and I may not look at the slide yet tonight, because this is going to take us into that section that I didn't want to get into yet tonight. But we'll see. We'll play it by ear. But let me give an introduction to it, to this next couple lines. If a person cuts himself, here's a great example. When I was, I was single still, I'd say 19 years old. I was standing over a garbage can in my mom's kitchen in Chicago, and it's coming up now in my mind because I talked about it with my son-in-law on Shabbat who cut his hand cutting a bagel. And I had a bagel in my hand, really smart, needs this brains. I had a bagel in my hand, and I started cutting it like this towards my hand. Like, what a genius. And right into the hand. Now, you can't see it on the camera, but I have a scar since then. Now, I can still tell you, I can remember, it's still tiny, tiny bit tender, but 50 years later, 45 years later. And when it happened, it was obviously bloody, it hurt, I put a bandage on it. And yet, here it is, many, many, many years later, and there's still a mark. There's still a sign on me physically that I did something like that. I also got on my thumb over here, only a couple of things I did like that, but somehow I got hold of a very sharp object. I think it was a razor blade when I was a little kid that was left lying around by accident. I have a big scar from that on my thumb. Okay, again, it happened many, many, many years ago. Now, let's assume for a moment that I was about to be brought to a human king, And the people who are bringing me to that king said, here's the deal. If he has any, I have an appendectomy scar. If he has any scars on his body, you need to physically do something to repair it so that it doesn't look like there's any scar. Now, I don't know, besides putting vitamin E and aloe vera on it, was something that helps get rid of a scar. I have no idea, but let's assume there is an action that if you go through certain steps, that whatever scars you have are removed. And only then can you go to the king. Even a person may do tshuva. In other words, they ate the food that wasn't eaten l'shem shamayim. And then they did tshuva. And what does the case mean here at tshuva? It does not mean chatati, aviti, pashati. It's not what it means. It means that you now use that which was negative, i.e. the food that you ingested merely for eating. And you raised it from where it is to a level of kedusha, because now you use that energy for a mitzvah or something davar shebikdusha. It still left a mark on you, on your neshama. There's still a srita. There's still a scratch, or there is still something, a tzaleket, maybe a scar, something there. How do we get rid of that? We don't. Not in this world. I mentioned to you that in Perek Chet, we're going to talk about a couple things that are a bit scary. The purpose of this, the Balatanian writing what he's about to say, and then in depth in Perek Chet, about what's called chibut hakever, is not to scare the pants off you. He deals with this topic, which I'll explain in a minute, no different than he's going to explain what a tzaddik is, what a benoni is, because to him, it's fact. We have to understand how service of Hashem works, and up to what point it works, and where we have to go through something even more severe. Let me read this and explain a little bit. However, shavshimu mimenu nishar beguf. This impact that's still there. There's still something in the person's body. Whether it's this, in other words, when I ate lunch, let's make up something that was 1,216 calories, and that's how much koach I now have. I didn't expend 1,216 calories doing the mitzvah, going to mincha, benching. Maybe used 87 of them or 1,000 of them, whatever it might be. But there's still something there that wasn't elevated. That's the physical. There's also the spiritual part. Okay, therefore, tzarich haguf lechibut hakever k'mo shekatav she'echtov lekaman. Person will have to go through something called chibut hakever, which I'm not going to translate into English. I'll just say it's something that happens to the neshama of a person. He calls it the guf, but it's really the neshama. We'll see that next chapter. After a person passes away, before they're actually able to go to Gan Eden. It is a cleansing process. It is not a punishment process. The reason I think people find the topic scary, and I'm not going to get into details tonight of what happens, is it sounds like it's a horrific punishment that happens to the person after they die. But it's not at all. It's a form of cleansing to prepare a person to be able to go before Hashem. We'll deal with that next week a little bit more. Next chapter, a little more in depth, because what we're going to get into, he's going to talk about here again about ma'achalot asurot and other things that we do that are not okay. And we're going to talk about how Ahavat Hashem, which is going to become a major topic later in the book also, how Ahavat Hashem will help to quench, mollify some of the things that we do in this world that are not the straight and narrow. This chapter is a bit of foreshadowing. He says it himself. He says, "Kamo she'echtov, kamo she'katavti," like I write, I will write, of some other topics that are coming up. We talked a little briefly today about simcha. It's going to be a major topic later. Ahavat Hashem. We're going to talk about Ahavat Hashem, Yirat Hashem, which we sort of did already, but it's going to be more in depth. We're going to talk about Chibut HaKever in the next chapter. But next week, Bezrat Hashem, we're going to finish this chapter. God willing, it's not much left. Maybe, we'll see. And understand a little bit more about what we can do in order to not only change how we do things, but that when we do things that are not in line with what the expectation of Hashem would be, how we rectify that also. Until then, I wish you all a wonderful good evening.
Rabbi, I have one quick question.
Even Rabbi,
two. does the Baal HaTanya go over things that may not be looked upon as correct or how should I say holy, but for some reason that would get you closer to Hashem?
I don't understand the question. Try again.
Some things that we do might not be looked upon as being correct or nachon or kadosh, but through those actions, individually, one would get closer to Hashem doing something. I'm not talking about murder. I'm talking about other things that are
right. So okay, so let me give you an example of what I think you're saying.
Let's say some people drink. I don't know, on Shabbat morning they have a drink before they go to shul, and because that brings them to a spiritual heights that they can't get when they're.
That's what he's. That in a sense is what he's saying. Obviously, if it's not to an excess. Obviously, as you know, Chabad is very much into that.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, even like I said, lying in the sun, you don't want too much because you, God forbid, get skin cancer. But lying in the sun, in order to get vitamin D, which is a direct thing from Hashem, when you lie in the sun and say, Hashem, give me vitamin D, you've already elevated that lying there. When you want to get it healthy, just to clear your mind, to relax, be able to serve Hashem, again, you're elevating something which is a mundane action, and you're bringing it to a high level of Kedusha. You're removing the Klippa, and you bring it to the level of Kedusha. Not everything works that way, though. No. Obviously, it's within reason. That answer you, I hope?
Okay. Yeah,
okay.
Thank you.
Very good. So just two more reminders tomorrow morning, and I'll send a notice out tomorrow morning, the Mesilat Yesharim in person and on Zoom, and Bezrat Hashem tomorrow evening, 7:30 at Annette Fox at Uri Kalfa's home, 112, here meets Beneville 112, for the book launch for the 3 images, as I showed you at the beginning, and also we'll talk a little bit about volume 2 of the Pew team. Have a wonderful evening and a great night.